It's been 6 years since Gone Girl, and we finally have a new David Fincher film. So today I'm going to stop and rank all 11 David Fincher films from the worst to the best. Hi, my name is Sean, and I love to talk about movies way too much. With that in mind, go ahead and join me down below in the comments section. Let me know your ranking of all 11 David Fincher films. My list isn't the right list, it's just my list, and I would love to see yours. One more thing before we get started, I've actually done a bunch of these director rankings before. I've done Christopher Nolan, Quentin Tarantino, Jon Favreau, Guy Ritchie, a whole bunch of them. If you enjoyed this ranking, there's more like it right up here, and let's get started. In last place is Alien 3. If you're familiar with my channel, you've probably repeatedly heard me say that Alien 3 is the movie that I hate the most. Apparently, they started shooting without a complete script and then just stopped at one point in time, finished writing the script, kind of looking at what they'd already shot, went back to shoot more stuff. Once they were finished, they kind of kicked David Fincher out of the process and they edited together what they wanted. Some producer just thought it was a little bit too long, pulled 30 minutes out of the movie willy-nilly, kind of removing an entire subplot so the movie's fairly incoherent, and then they put that out in theaters. The assembly cut is a little bit better, but it's still not a good movie. All of that would make it a bad film, but the reason that I hate it more than any film out there is what they do in the first 10 minutes. Aliens, its predecessor, is one of my absolute favorite films of all time, largely based on that relationship between Ripley and Newt and everything that Ripley does to save Newt. And in the first 10 minutes of this movie, they kill off Newt.
Not a great plan.
To me, that's just an unforgivable sin as a movie. It just ruins the entire experience because it damages a superior film, Aliens, by undermining the victory of that film. So this is the movie that I hate the most. Coming in at number 10 is Mank. This is actually a really tough film for me to discuss because on the one hand, David Fincher displays all of his technical skill perfectly capturing film of the 1930s and 40s, clearly has a deep knowledge and love for that time period, and through every single technical aspect and through the performances, he captures that time period perfectly. But the movie itself is designed for such a niche audience that it's inaccessible to any sort of normal audience. Every line of dialogue, every scene assumes that the audience has a working knowledge of this time period and the studio heads and the politics, and otherwise you're just left so far behind. So while I respected so much of the craft that went into this movie, I can't say that I really enjoyed it at all. Real quick, as a point of reference, I enjoy all of the rest of the films on this list, and I would give them a positive review. Next up is The Game, an intriguing thriller about a man playing a game that appears to be taking his life from him. This movie does a great job of keeping you guessing from beginning to end what exactly is going on, who is in on it, and who can he trust. Everything that he thought he believed, he can't trust in anymore, once again, as he loses control of his life. It's got a great cast and a whole bunch of great performances, but I think by the time the credits roll, by the time you get the final couple of plot twists, it just strains too much credibility for me to view it as kind of a top-tier thriller. You have to suspend too much disbelief for me to be able to fully enjoy this film once you look back at everything that took place and in light of what happens in the final moments, and that robs a lot of my joy watching this film. Number 8, The Curious Case of Benjamin Button, a film that in many ways is an incredibly unique cinematic experience, and in other ways reminded me heavily of Forrest Gump.
My mom always said life was like a box of chocolates.
As well as The Notebook. Its central premise about a boy born as an old man that grows younger as he gets older inherently has a bunch of fascinating ideas that go along with it. And therefore, the movie kind of sucks you in as you watch kind of this reverse perspective on life taking place and what that would look like. The movie takes a little while to get going. I wasn't fully on board for about the first 45 minutes, but once he gets a bit older and can start going off on his adventures, there's just something very interesting of watching life from this perspective. On the other hand, several of the choices that our lead characters make it tough for you to really connect with them or like them very much. So while the central premise is very captivating, interesting, and the scope and size of the story is massive, the characters themselves, you wish, did something that you could connect with a little bit better. So this is a movie to me that was just a real mixed bag of like, well, this is unique and kind of familiar, and wow, this is really interesting, and why are they making these choices? Why are they so unlikable? So a movie that I don't think fully lived up to its potential. Then we have Panic Room. This is a great example of how a world-class director can elevate a fairly standard thriller. On paper, this just looks like another home invasion concept that anyone could come up with, but in the execution, it does everything right. It gets to the point quickly, it doesn't linger on any one conflict too long, and it keeps shifting up the dynamics of the story. Even inside of the villains, there's conflict in their group because each of them are very different. Some of them are just pure evil. Others actually have motivations that you can understand, and they're sympathetic in a lot of ways. And while you don't want them to succeed in certain senses, you want something better for them. All in all, this is far from the most ambitious film on this list, but it delivers the exact experience and the thrills that you want when you put in a movie like this. Number 6, The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, a multi-layered and complex story with lots of rabbit trails that you actually want to go on. At the heart of this movie are two lead characters that you care about because they are so broken based off the circumstances that have led them to the events of this film. They're interesting, so we want to see them on all these different journeys, whether it's the main storyline as their paths converge together or some of the little side paths that they go on. They're all really interesting. Along the way, there's a bunch of twists and turns that deliver the answers that you want that are satisfying without being the obvious choice in paths as you go along throughout the story. Also, for a movie that's really long, it moves at a nice brisk pace. I started the movie at 11 o'clock at night and assumed I was going to go to bed before the movie was over, but it just kind of flew by for me. Now, I do think because there are so many plot threads and subplots and rabbit trails, it has way too many endings. When you think the movie's over, you realize there's a bunch of threads that need to be tied off, and so it kind of keeps on going a little bit too long. But all in all, a great viewing experience in a phenomenal opening credits sequence. In 5th place, Zodiac, a sprawling story about the real-life investigation into the Zodiac killer. I think a story like this naturally captivates an audience because the real-life mystery of the Zodiac killer is so intriguing. And so when you take great, interesting source material and give it to a director like Fincher who shines in this sort of space and give him a world-class set of actors, you get something special. A big part of that is the movie focuses on the right things. Naturally, the mystery holds your attention as you realize that this stuff really happened. But beyond that, it dives into how damaging obsession can be for the investigators themselves and their personal lives. It looks at all the restrictions that make an investigation like this so difficult. A lot of times we don't why is it that so many crimes go unsolved when there's so many different pieces of information? And you watch this movie and you realize all of the constraints that the police have that make it difficult to actually put together the full case with a situation like this. And it just draws you in from beginning to end. Now, I will say that I thought the second half after the time jump was a lot better than the first half. The first half felt a little bit like they were having to jump through a bunch of plot points to hit all these real life events that happened. And as soon as we got to the second half and it got a bit more focused on Jake Gyllenhaal's character, that's where it caught me a little bit more. And if the first half was as good as the second half, this movie would be even higher on the list. Next up is Gone Girl. This movie might not tackle the biggest themes and ideas. It might not be as groundbreaking as other films on this list, but I just think that this is a fantastic thriller that does everything that you want from a movie like this. Right out of the gate, the movie captures your attention with the central mystery about where the girl has gone, and then it just keeps presenting new information that gives you a new perspective on all the information it previously gave us, but we don't know what information is trustworthy. Throughout the whole story, it has these themes about we don't really know all that much about the people around us. We just trust that they're reliable. And built into this story is one of the best uses of an unreliable narrator that I can remember. Throughout the first 40% of the story, we keep being given information through a journal that we think is intended to inform us about their relationship, only to learn it was designed to deceive us in regards to what's actually happening. And it's a movie whose biggest twist isn't even halfway through the movie, but it still holds your attention all the way until the credits roll. Through a series of characters whose flaws and deceptions make the chess match between the two of them so fascinating to watch. I think the movie rushes through the last 10 minutes like they weren't sure exactly where to end things, but besides that, I just love this movie. Real quick before I give you my top 3, remember to share your ranking down below in the comments section. My list is not the right list, it's just my list, and I would love to see yours. Also remember, I've done a bunch of these director rankings before. Nolan, Tarantino, J.J. Abrams, M. Night. They're all right up here. If you've enjoyed this video, there's something else up there that you'll enjoy. In third place is Fight Club, a groundbreaking film about the angst of a generation raised in a consumeristic society, but without any transcendent cause.
The first rule of Fight Club is you do not talk about Fight Club.
The film works as both a celebration of masculine energy as well as how toxic it gets when it's not channeled towards some sort of cause. A big part of what makes this movie work is that this might be David Fincher's most stylized film, with all his creative energy flowing through telling this story. Of course, you have iconic performances from Brad Pitt as well as Edward Norton, and a fantastic final twist that when you first watch the movie, you don't really see it coming, but it makes a lot of sense on second viewing. All in all, it's a movie that doesn't try to deliver easy, pat answers. It doesn't try to sand off the nuances of real life. It actually allows the audience to come to their own conclusions as to what it all meant. Our runner-up is Seven. On paper, this movie actually follows a lot of the tropes of this genre. You have a serial killer who's got a gimmick being investigated by 2 detectives. One of them is about to retire, and the other one is a new hotshot wanting to make a name for himself.
Have you ever seen anything like this? No.
That's the setup for a lot of movies like this, but this is a perfect example of, once again, what happens when you take the tropes and hand them to a world-class storyteller. You get one of the best films of the genre. A big part of that is that simply everything about it is fantastic. Morgan Freeman may be playing the familiar detective that's a week away from retirement, but he's written with so much depth to him. He's clearly someone that's troubled by what the work has done to him and the toll that it's taken, what it's cost him to have this career, but at the same time, he has moments of levity. That sort of nuance and detail is given to each of these characters, and they balance each other out so nicely. This is also the first time David Fincher actually had some control with the filmmaking, and you just see his style all throughout the film, from the look to the editing, the way it's put together, the use of music. David Fincher's marks are all over this film, and of course, it's a movie that builds to a perfect twist conclusion.
Put the gun down. I saw you with the box. What was in the box?
Where everything comes together. The journeys of each of our two detectives, the gimmick, the scheme of the serial killer, they all intertwine perfectly for a satisfying, gut-wrenching conclusion to the film. A lot of elements of the film may be familiar, but that doesn't mean they're not fantastic. But in first place, The Social Network, the legal troubles and interpersonal struggles of the creator of a website doesn't seem like it would be particularly compelling as a movie, but when you hand it to a world-class screenwriter in Aaron Sorkin and a fantastic director in David Fincher, you get an amazing film. What this movie does so well is creating these complex characters that, on the one hand, you want to see them fail and you want to see them succeed. Mark Zuckerberg isn't a particularly likable character in this film. He's a distinctly unlikable jerk, but he's done in a way that while you want to see him change, you want to see him treat people better, his skill and his talent and his savvy are compelling enough for you to want to see him succeed with this site that he's building. He's this deeply flawed character driven by his insecurities. The whole film kind of has that back and forth dynamic to it of nothing is as simple as good and bad, or this is the person you want to succeed and this is the person you want to fail. All of it has complexities and nuance to it. Another thing that I think makes this movie really work well is that Fincher contains Sorkin. Aaron Sorkin, when left to his own devices, can get ahead of himself a little bit, have people monologue a bit too much. But when you have his incredible talents and wit filtered through David Fincher, you get a fantastic product. The characters are interesting, the scenes are engaging, and it packs a lot of punch as you move into the third act. So for me, this is the best of Fincher's films that's just great cinema. So it comes in at number 1. If you enjoyed this ranking, I've got a bunch more like it in that playlist right over there. Nolan, Tarantino, J.J. Abrams, Jon Favreau, M. Night Shyamalan, all right over there, and a bunch more. Thank you so much for watching, and keep talking movies too much.